Hey, 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 Mom Nation, and welcome back to another episode of our love story with the lovely Dyanna. Welcome, Dyanna.
Hi, good morning.
Hey, I love this time because you know what? I don't know if you know this or anything. Being married it can be challenging.
Absolutely. That's like an understatement.
And real quick, like I'm thinking about this. I was with family that I haven't seen in a while earlier this week, and we were chatting and catching up and everything. And I'm like, man, why is it so hard? And I don't want to say it like that, but why can it be a challenge to be married? You know what I mean? And all I can think of is it's two different people coming from two different places, being raised two different ways, even if you're like from the same town, growing up across the street from each other or whatever, because that does happen. Still, you're raised very differently, right?
Yeah.
And you're expected to come together and for it to be all hunky dory.
Yeah. And it just doesn't typically happen like that.
We expect it to, though. What's up
We
with
expect
that?
it to. We expect it to look like the movies, but it usually doesn't. And even if it does, at some point in the relationships evolve because people evolve. We
Right.
change over time, and our needs and our wants and our feelings, like those things change over time. And so when we love somebody, it's a choice, and we're going to love any, version of them that might come that we haven't met yet.
That's a really good point because as we start to get to know somebody, we're complex beings, right? So there's like layers of who we are that unfold at different times. I'm assuming depending on comfort level, depending on maturity, learning, all of this stuff, right?
Life
Um,
experience, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And how do we cope with those different layers and deal with those changes that those layers bring?
Absolutely. And decide if we're accepting them or not.
Hmm. I think the show is a really good place to like sort of start, sort of just have in your back pocket. We share a couple of tools, tips, tricks, real life situations here,
Definitely.
like today. Today
Like
we're going to
today.
bring up a real life situation because if you've been following us at all, you know that a lot of times we will pull a random. We don't want to put anyone on blast here. We will pull a random post out there in social media land, often from the Mom Nation group, not always. That's a Facebook group, by the way, if you're listening on a different channel or a different platform. And today is one of those days, and we have a very interesting post to share today. I'll pull it up on the screen for those of you who might be just listening. I'll read it as well. And it starts off as my husband and I don't argue often. But when we do, the next day, he likes to just drag it out for much longer than he needs to. And I really feel like that helps nothing. But when he's short or doesn't want to talk to me until he magically wants to be friends again, then I just have to be accepting of that. And it really ruins my day and mood for the entire day. But then I just forgive him. I don't know how to not let it affect me or what I should be doing to show him that it's not nice. And he says that it's my fault in the first place because I don't bring up the argument or whatever is bothering me at all at a good time, or that I don't stop the argument when it should be stopped. But I don't think that those things should be a thing. I feel like some women, it doesn't affect them as much as I wish that was me. So she's feeling like it affects her more than it should, is what that sounds like.
Mm-hmm. Exactly what that sounds like. Which, I mean, let's just say, like,
Yeah,
no. Like,
right. Silent
people
treatment.
no. Like, people who say it like they're okay with it are just avoiding conflict or some sort of vulnerability because, like, that's not okay behavior.
Right.
So let's talk about like how they're handling conflict. I'd be really curious, like, we don't fight often or have conflict often, but is that because we're avoiding conflict by not bringing things up when they bother us? Because not having conflict isn't healthy either. Like, having
Right.
conflict is really healthy, and the resolution, the repair, and all of that. So, one, is it because nobody brings stuff up in a reasonable amount of time is why we're not having a lot of conflict. And when you do have conflict, is it about like a particular theme? Like, are we arguing about the same things like all the time, or is this like different stuff all the time? And who is bringing that up? Like, who is initiating the conflict? Ideally, the person who feels hurt in a scenario, in a situation, should be the one to say like, hey, like, I don't love this. Like, let me tell you like where I'm coming from so that we can repair it and I can be validated, right? And get some empathy, which is ideal, right? If that person is not saying anything when they're hurt, they're doing themselves a disservice by not saying anything to try to repair the conflict. But it also teaches the other person in the relationship that it doesn't really matter what we do or what I do. Like, they're not going to bring it up anyway, because like they just don't want to have conflict. So it kind of gives them carte blanche to just behave, however, without or with very little accountability involved. You know what I mean?
Yeah. What, and I'm not really sure how to frame my question exactly, but where does the whole silent treatment thing come from?
Yeah.
And what is it expected to solve?
Nothing. The silent treatment is very punitive. Like, it's to punish. It comes from a place of contempt, where like I am somehow like better than you are or superior to you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about back in childhood, if your parent was giving you the silent treatment, like, you knew you were in trouble, right? And you might even find ways to like, kind of get in some conversation there with mom, like, hey, what's for dinner? Or, you know what I mean? And trying to like emotionally regulate the other person, which is never our job as a child, or for another adult, as adults for that matter. But it's very punitive. It's not to resolve an issue. It's to teach the other person that like, you've made me mad and now I'm going to make you suffer. That's essentially what it means.
Yeah. Any suggestions on how to get out of the cycle that this couple seems to be in? First off, like, how do you know you're not communicating? You know what I mean? I feel like that's a really silly question, but is it?
No, definitely not. I mean, first you have to recognize that there is a cycle. Like, you have to acknowledge that there is one and acknowledge what each person contributes to that cycle, right? But it's a really hard conversation to have when both people potentially are conflict avoidant for their own reasons. One that just like shuts down and leaves and wants to rug sweep, and the other person that just convinces themselves it's really not that big of a deal and gets over it because they don't want to have the conflict, right? So both are avoidance, but just different flavors of avoidance, right? So like, we have to recognize like what our accountability is. Again, that makes it really difficult if both avoidant people are afraid of blame. And a lot of times that's where punitive or contemptuous behavior comes from. It comes from a place of like, I don't want to be wrong because then it's my fault. And then there has to be blame. Like, you started this. This is your fault. It's your fault that you didn't bring it up when it bothered you, whatever. And when we come from a place of blame and shame, it really makes it challenging to be vulnerable and to acknowledge like what you're actually accountable for. So if you look at the idea of blame means that somebody has to be right and somebody has to be wrong. And like, that's not great. Like, that doesn't feel good when you're trying to like resolve a conflict, right? Because like, who wants to be the one that's wrong? Like, nobody, right? But if you take blame and you shift it to accountability, everyone has accountability. So like, what is my role in it? And then what was your role in it? And let's talk about what our own roles were in it, almost as if we were like looking at it from like a bird's eye view and like watching it all happen. Like, oh, I see how, I got really upset. I got reactive and I did this, this, and this. And then, I did this, this, and this. And like, oh, so I can see how that all played out. Well, I don't love that. I don't love how I'm accountable there, but I can recognize how I am accountable. You know what I mean? That shifts the entire tone of the repair from like the blame game to identifying accountability to see what our roles are so we can create some sort of change.
What are some different words that I can use when I feel myself going to blame game, but I don't want to trigger my partner?
Definitely always start with an I statement, right? Because like, the second you start a statement with you, it's just like ding, ding, ding. Like, that person's just waiting for the sound from your mouth to stop before they say something, because they're going to get defensive, right? Because you're coming for them, right? But like, if I feel like I'm going for the blame game because I'm upset, one, I have to recognize that I am becoming dysregulated. And if I'm getting to a point of no return, I need to say so and like take a break. But if I am before that point of no return, then like I am really hurt and I don't feel like I'm heard, or I don't feel like I'm being understood or whatever. Like I feel, I want, I need, like those sorts of statements, instead of going for the blame game. Also identifying that in your partner too. So like if you feel like you're being attacked, like say that too. Like, I feel like you're coming for me right now. Like, I feel like I'm being attacked. I feel I'm on the defense right now. Like, I just want to resolve this and repair this, but like, I also don't want to be attacked either. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Obviously, I feel like I know the answer to this question, but obviously, couples therapy would be helpful here.
Definitely. Absolutely. Just to have a third party that's like objective to the relationship, that can help you identify what your cycle is and what your role within that cycle is, and help tap into some of that emotional vulnerability that is taking away from, you know, the potentially secure attachment in the relationship, because it feels like they're both a little bit, like I said, avoidant in their own ways, their own flavors of avoidant, right? And so having someone there to help them walk through like their own like emotional vulnerability and how to be vulnerable with each other, I think would be really helpful for them to resolve and repair in the future, and ensure that they're aligned on the same goal. You know what I mean? Is the goal to repair and protect emotional intimacy, or is the goal to be right? Because if that's the goal, you're probably going to be a lot further away from repair and resolution than you think.
Yeah, because what does being right do? I mean, it stops you from there's a lot of opportunity to listen to somebody, right? That it kind of, you avoid when you need to be right. Can we dive into that just a little bit? So,
Yeah.
because I see that you understand what I mean, but I want to make sure everybody else does too.
Yeah, like where does that come from, the quest to be right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, on the surface, or as adults, it could be like, you could try to boil it down to like ego, right? But what it does come down to is, what was that childhood experience like, and how often did they have to fight to be heard, or how often did they hear that, you know, what is wrong with you, or you're wrong, or you did this terrible thing and it's your fault? You know what I mean? And so when we hear a lot of that growing up, it becomes essentially an activation or a trigger point for us. You know what I mean? And so then we use that against other people in our lives, not because we're thinking like, oh, this happened to me, so I'm going to do it to this other person, but it's very subconscious. It's a learned behavior. You know what I mean? So deep down, that person is really hurting. That person is coming from a place of like, I'm always wrong, and so I will go to whatever lengths I have to not be wrong, even if that means hurting you or shaming you. I don't want to be the one that's wrong. I'm going to make sure that I'm not going to be the one that's wrong in this situation. I want to be right, because being wrong incites a lot of shame. You know what I mean? A lot of guilt. And obviously those are very uncomfortable feelings. Perhaps two of the most motivating emotions in the human condition are shame and guilt. And so if we can do something to avoid them, then we will, even if it comes at another person's expense.
Yeah, or our own, because it feels like that would being that way robs me of being able to hear somebody else.
Absolutely. And that other person's probably going to shut down. That shame and blame is going to show up as defensiveness. You know what I mean? Well, this is your fault, or you should have come to me sooner, or you could have done this. Like, okay, cool. So I'll just, you know, shut down then. Like, I don't really have anything else to say, because you're telling me that you are very unwilling to look at what your role is here. And without that sort of sense of vulnerability, there isn't any trust. And if there isn't any trust, repair is like darn near impossible, you know?
Yeah, true. Anything else that you'd like to pull out of this one, or do you think that we were pretty thorough with it?
I think we covered most of, you know, sort of what seems to be happening here on the outside. I would encourage them though to like pursue like couples counseling if they're both willing, to be able to explore like why our attachment styles are the way that they are, figure out what they are first, and like why they are the way they are, and how avoidance has played a role in our relationship, and how it has potentially negatively impacted our emotional intimacy and perhaps even physical intimacy too.
Yeah.
This isn't like the blame game, you did this or you did this, but like we are doing a thing. We have created a cycle that is hurting both of us and isn't what we want. You know what I mean? So try to get aligned on what those goals are and the values in the relationship, and start moving towards that with someone that can help give them the tools to communicate differently and be a bit more vulnerable in order to build that emotional intimacy back up, and not rug sweep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doing
Yeah. That is never good for anybody.
No.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being here. And how can our audience members, if they would like to connect with you, how can they best do that?
Definitely just go onto my website, DyannaEiselTherapy.com. You can click on the upper right button, schedule a free consultation. It'll take you to a scheduling page, and you can pick a day and a time that works for you for a totally free 15-minute phone consultation.
Awesome. Well, thank you again.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
You too. All right, guys, if you want to check out any more of our previous episodes, then hop on over to our YouTube channel. It is at Mom Nation USA. Scroll down just a little ways. You will see the Our Love Story playlist. There you will find Dyanna, and more Dyanna. If you would like to listen podcast style, then on your favorite podcast platform, do a quick search for Mom Nation Talk Radio. There you will find us, download, all the things. You will never miss a beat, and we will see you next time.
See you next time. Bye.
Struggling to reconnect with yourself or the ones you love? Meet Dyanna Eisel, a licensed marriage and family therapist, here to support your journey toward connection and clarity. She helps you feel seen, heard, and supported as you grow through life's challenges, emotionally, sexually, and relationally. A safe, judgment-free space where growth can begin. Come as you are and grow into who you're becoming. Reach out today and take your first step toward healing with Dyanna.